terrifying, inhuman screams echoing through an Ontario forest, Soviet submarine crews encountering an unknown quacking in the North Atlantic, and visitors to Yellowstone National Park, eerie noises often referred to as the Yellowstone Lake music. These are 10 sounds recorded in nature that no one's been able to explain. On October 3rd, 2017, a man named Gino Mikas captured a strange screaming sound echoing through the woods near Sioux Lookout, Ontario, while with his wife and grandson. Mikas said they'd been walking a trail for around 10 to 15 minutes before turning back toward their car. It was on their way back that they heard the eerie screams. Thought it was a moose, Mikas told the news. It was the first thing that came to my mind because it was rutting season when they mate. But after hearing the sound continue, he wasn't convinced. I couldn't figure out what it was, he went on. I kind of think it's a wolf, but I don't know. I never heard a wolf sound like that before. Mikas, who's hunted occasionally since he was young, said the noise was unlike anything he'd ever heard before. I heard many animals like bears, rabbits, lynx, he said. I've never heard this. Even wildlife experts were unsure. Biologists with Ontario's Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry said it could have been a larger mammal, but because of the distance from the recorder, they couldn't say for sure. Along the coast of North Carolina and other parts of the world, people have reported hearing strange booming sounds known as the Seneca guns. They sounded like explosions. A lot of people describe them sounding like cannon blasts or, a loud crack of thunder, except it's not storming. In some cases, the noise has been powerful enough to shake houses and rattle windows. As for the name, nobody's completely sure where it comes from. Some said it's connected to Seneca Lake in New York, where similar sounds have been reported for years. Others think it comes from a Civil War battle in Seneca, Georgia, because again, the booms almost sound like distant cannon fire. But nobody's been able to figure out exactly what causes these sounds. They're usually heard in coastal areas, but they're never heard out at sea. It can happen at any time of the year, though reports seem to increase when the weather starts cooling down. Are they underwater earthquakes, meteors entering the atmosphere, some kind of unknown weather phenomenon? In 2005, the North Carolina Geological Survey said shallow offshore earthquakes could be responsible, but it found that the events didn't really line up with earthquakes picked up by seismographs. Other researchers say the source might actually be somewhere in the atmosphere rather than underground. Similar unexplained booms have been reported around the world though, from Japan to the Netherlands. To this day, the true cause is still unknown. For years, there have been people in Bristol, England, who've claimed to hear a strange low-frequency hum nobody seems to be able to explain. People who hear it say it's not just a faint background noise, though. The sound's been distracting enough to keep people awake. Some even say it's driven them crazy trying to figure out where it's coming from. This goes back a long time. Back in the 70s, hundreds of people complained to the city about a strange noise that seemed to appear at night. There were investigations, and that led to some possible explanations, mainly factory equipment. There was also the possibility it was people with tinnitus complaining about the noise, but others came up with far stranger ideas, like UFOs hovering over the city or secret military activity. For more than 100 years, people visiting Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming have reported hearing strange sounds. The weird part is, these noises would seemingly come out of nowhere. One minute, campers would be sitting by the water enjoying the quiet morning, and the next, they'd hear something strange echoing in the distance. People have described the sound in a lot of different ways. Some said it sounds like metallic cables crashing together. Others have compared it to organ music. The noise would slowly get louder, almost like it was moving closer before suddenly fading away. These strange sounds, sometimes called lake music, have been reported since at least the late 1800s. In 1890, visitors were already writing about hearing bizarre noises over the lakes. Engineer Hiram M. Chittenden even mentioned them in his 1895 book, The Yellowstone National Park, Historical and Descriptive, where he described them as sounding like the, quote, ringing of telegraph wires or the humming of a swarm of bees. The sounds were also heard by members of the 1871 Hayden expedition. Geologist Frank H. Bradley wrote about hearing a, quote, curious sound between a whistle and a horse whine while eating breakfast. Over the years, people have come up with different explanations, like strange wind patterns, temperature changes, or vibrations traveling through the ground, but none of them have completely explained the odd sounds. In February 2016, people in Forest Grove, Oregon started hearing a strange high-pitched noise that quickly became one of the city's biggest mysteries. The sound was described as something like a bad violin note mixed with non-stop microphone feedback. It usually happened after dark, lasting anywhere from a few seconds to several minutes. It was an annoying noise. I mean, that was obvious, but what on earth was causing it? Well, people started obsessing over it. The mystery had to be solved. A physics professor at nearby Pacific University, Andrew Dawes, even created a map where folks could mark where and when they heard the sound, hoping that enough reports would help narrow it down. As the story spread, so did the theories. Some blamed faulty construction equipment or industrial machinery of some kind, but others went further. Forest Grove Police Captain Mike Herb said they received some very odd calls from people. Some of the best theories were the mating Sasquatch, an alien mothership attempting contact, mating drumfish, and finally the sound of the 7 trumpets that biblically indicate the end of time. But just as suddenly as the sound appeared, after weeks of all this speculation, it suddenly just stopped. For years, people around the world have reported hearing strange noises coming from the sky that have been nicknamed sky trumpets, because they sound like loud trumpets coming from the sky. Videos of these noises have hit YouTube from places all over the world. What causes it? Well, nobody knows. Could be some sort of unusual weather condition, industrial noise, aircraft, or possibly something even stranger. The biggest mystery here is that there's no visible source for them. The sound seems to be coming from above the clouds, like some godlike entity is sounding a horn from the heavens. The quackers were a series of strange underwater sounds picked up by Soviet submarines in the North Atlantic and Arctic starting in the 60s. Sailors said they sounded somewhere between a duck quacking and a frog croaking, which is of course how they got the name. The really strange part was that the sounds sometimes seemed to follow submarines, circle around them, change pitch, and react when the crew switched on their active sonar. At first, some Soviet officers suspected they were dealing with a secret NATO tracking system or some other classified piece of technology. Others thought it had to be some kind of unknown creature. Whatever it was, the reports were taken seriously enough that the Soviet Navy spent years trying to figure this out. It wasn't until decades later that a possible answer finally showed up. In 2014, scientists confirmed that a very similar sound, called the bioduck, is actually made by the Antarctic minke whale. The whales had been making the sound all along, but nobody connected it to them because they're notoriously difficult to study. They spend most of their lives hidden under Antarctic sea ice. Even so, there's still some doubt. The bioduck recordings came from the Southern Ocean around Antarctica, while the original quacker reports came from the North Atlantic and Arctic. That creepy audio comes from a Reddit user named GrowthCertain4435, who heard the eerie howl for months before it suddenly disappeared. He still has no idea what it was. It happened on his farm in East Tennessee. For about 4 months, the Redditor kept hearing a strange howl coming from the woods behind the property. It wasn't every single night, but it happened often enough to get his attention, usually right around sunset or just after it got dark. GrowthCertain said the sound was hard to describe, but closest thing he could compare it to was Chewbacca from Star Wars. Sometimes it sounded like whatever was making the noise was surprisingly close, then just as suddenly as it started, the sound disappeared and never came back. Bate Green Beach is a mile-long white sand beach on Lake Superior in Michigan. It's known for a strange phenomenon, along with it, a legend. Run your hands through the dry sand. It gives off this high-pitched, almost squeaking or whooshing sound. The story goes that a Native American woman lost the man that she loved in the waters of Lake Superior. She returned to the shoreline day after day, calling and singing for him, hoping he'd somehow find his way home. People say her voice still echoes through the sand, giving the beach that haunting song. Even stranger, the effect only works while the sand is on that beach. Take it somewhere else, and it no longer sings. Now, some of the most famous and controversial pieces of audio connected to Bigfoot are known as the Sierra Sounds. Recordings were captured in the early 70s by Ron Moorhead and Al Berry, camping in the remote Sierra Nevada mountains of California. The first recordings were made in 1971, after the pair began hearing strange vocalizations coming from the surrounding forest near their hunting camp. The sounds continued over multiple nights. grunts and whistles coming from the darkness around their camp, but the strangest pieces they recorded have to be what later became known as the samurai chatter, a series of really odd sounds that almost sounded like creatures communicating back and forth in some bizarre, non-human language. Years later, in 2008, retired US Navy cryptologic linguist Scott Nelson examined the recordings. He claimed the sounds contained patterns that resembled a form of language. Of course, there are skeptics, but with no definitive answer more than 50 years after they were recorded, these recordings are still some of the most famous possible pieces of Sasquatch evidence. And that's been the video. Catch you, yes, you specifically, next time.